I'm Helen Norbury, and this is Becoming Unapologetically Me, the show all about authentic self-expression with expert guests from the fields of health, leadership, and mindset. This show is here to show you that you don't need to conform to the expectations that friends, family, and society have of you, and actually what we can unearth when we find the courage to become the unapologetic version of who we are. Grab a cup of coffee and get your notepad out for this week's episode.
Hi, I'm Jeff. I produce Becoming Unapologetically Me for your wonderful host, Helen Norbury. Today, I'm in Gansbaai, South Africa, a place that I know also has meaningful memories for Helen. This is a special episode where I go back and look at my personal favorite episodes that stood out to me in the edit room from the previous season, being season 3. I'm sure you'll want to go back and soak those episodes up again like a good piece of bread. This first clip is from Helen's first solo episode, where she talks about what we're like under pressure, and that then leads us beautifully into Greg Fearon's episode, where he talks a bit about our superhero identities, how to identify them, and how to develop them further.
I remember working with a coach many years ago, and she said, "Who are you when you're squeezed? What comes out when you're squeezed?" And I always think that's a really important part of the conversation about becoming unapologetically you. So really understanding who you are and seeing and being happy with that version of what comes out when you're squeezed. I see so many people sort of freewheeling through life, really, especially a lot of people pleasers. So really molding themselves to fit what others want them to be. And inevitably, at some point, they find that they're dissatisfied with life. I guess if they're lucky, they can put their finger on what that is and why that is and start to do something to address it. I've seen it over and over again. And honestly, it was me not all that long ago, really. I suppose up till about 8 years ago, that was me. And it's really what inspired the birth of Becoming Unapologetically Me, because that journey that I've been on over the last 8 years of becoming unapologetically me has really helped me to go from that place of intense dissatisfaction despite success and from the outside, everything looking great, to really go from that place to a real feeling of inner peace. And actually, if you squeeze me, it's the same as if you don't squeeze me. I'm always the same. Being authentic and in integrity with who I am are two of my top values. So I always felt misaligned when there was a different version of me when I was squeezed, because ultimately I was trying to fit in with what others wanted me to be, or what I perceived others wanted me to be. So I thought I'd talk a bit about how you go from that freewheeling state to being unapologetically you. And a big part of this is something that I talk with Greg in one of our subsequent episodes, which is really about understanding what Greg calls your superhero identity. But it's really the authentic embodiment of the version of yourself that you're becoming. I really don't like the phrase or the saying, fake it until you make it, because particularly if you're someone who values authenticity and integrity, as I do, there's nothing that sits well with faking it until you make it. So I can get behind, though, this creation of a superhero identity. And it's certainly something that is constantly evolving and something that I've had to continue to evolve this year, in fact.
Well, number one is clarity. I sincerely believe that everyone should be able to quote kind of over their vision, their purpose, life goals, whatever you want to call it, their superhero identity, whatever it is. Like, you should be able to just, this is me, this is where I want to be. And I think people, we get asked when we were kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? Remember that conversation?
Oh, yeah. And
but it was always
many times over my lifetime.
You got to tell me now, what was your first one?
Vet.
That's
Literally,
freaky.
really, I had with my best friend at school at the time, we designed our logo, we designed the practice. I was going to do big animals, she was going to do small animals. We had the whole lot sorted until I realized that science wasn't my strong point.
That's really freaky. I wanted to be a zoologist, David Attenborough. So that's very freaky. Yeah. The stars were aligned with that.
Indeed, indeed.
I was going somewhere. Oh, yeah. So it was always a vocation or a job. It was never who is the person you want to become. Like, we weren't taught that. So I think that's number one, is get clear on that. Number two, then start to work backwards. Like, right, what are the things that you really want to include? And how can you start to introduce them, maybe slowly, into your life? You know, if it's you want to start a class, a Zumba class, whatever it is, once a week, start there. Then get a support system, whether that be a coach, whether that be awesome people, find a tribe that's walking the same path as you. I think that's probably been one of my biggest things, was finding people who are in a similar field, but with a similar mindset.
Definitely.
So get that support. And then it's not even be a beginner, just be a student. That sounds crazy. But if you go into every bit of exercise or every time you go to eat, like, just think, what is it doing for you? How is it helping? Remind yourselves of that. You know, sit down and end of the week, journal on that stuff. I call it a body journal. You know, it's right, taking stock of that week and what's been going on, and how can you then change it and improve it, or keep it the same. Like, we really sometimes need to stop changing things. We have a habit of looking for the new. And, you know, I remember when I said to someone, they said, how often did you change your training program? I said, probably once every 16 weeks or so. And their eyes popped out of their head. I said, well, I know throughout that time that I've been able to get stronger.
How can our superhero identities thrive when they're bogged down in the kryptonite of self-judgment and shame? Namisha Mehta's episode was a shining light for me personally, as she lifted the veil on her experience dealing with body image issues and self-judgment, and how she lifted herself up out of all of that.
So I began with having body issues in terms of my culture. You know, it's very common for an auntie to come up to you and say, you're fat. Very, very common. You know, it's not even looked down upon. Now it is, thank God. But back in the day, it was so normal. It was like, she's just stating a fact.
Wow.
And you need to do something about it. It was not looked down upon. Your own family did that to you. There was a lot of talking about color and how you looked. And there was a lot of pressure on being a certain way. And not just from society, but from your own people. And that plays in my mind a lot. And I know that I grew up a people pleaser, a complete people pleaser. I don't think I had an image for myself. I just went with the image that I was given, and I just fit myself into that image somehow. And that was a big struggle. And then the health stuff happened. And now I was just like, oh my God, I feel unworthy, not beautiful at all. And my hair was falling, and I was just in sweats all day. I would just wear sweats, and that was my life. So I stopped thinking about myself completely. It's so sad that we as a society are doing this, you know, in so many different forms, whether it's from families or whether it's from communities, whether it's from schools or whether it's from social media. I feel that there's so much of this happening where you are judged and then you judge yourself. See, here's the thing. The mindset knows that the voice that's coming from the outside is not their voice, right? Yeah. But it doesn't realize, or you don't realize, when your mind adapts that voice as your own. Yeah. So I'll give you an example. For the longest time, I used to think, somebody must have said this to me, that wearing shorts means you're not of good character. And I took that as my own voice eventually. So when I started living my life as an adult, nobody was there to supervise me then. Nobody was there to tell me not to wear these types of clothes, you know, and only to stick to these types of clothes. But my head, as soon as I put something short on, would say, you're a blah, blah, blah. You know, you look like a blah, blah, blah. You know, so I did that to myself. Yeah. So we become that. Yeah. We become the thing that sort of, I guess, abused us. And that is the problem that then creates our identity. We're not saying that other people are not going to judge us. Everyone's going to judge you as soon as you walk out the door. I'm not saying that suddenly if you put on a lovely outfit, people are going to be like, oh, this one we're going to spare. We're going to go to the next one and judge her. No. We're all getting judged some way or the other. Good, bad, whatever, doesn't matter. But the thing is, are you judging yourself? And that's what I work with. I'm working with people who are judging themselves. Their mirror image is being judged.
Yeah.
And that is causing a problem.
Self-judgment and how it holds us back is also a strong theme in Stephanie Thoma's episode. From concepts like growth mindsets to sociological constructs, Stephanie pulls back the curtain on what humans are really, deeply, truly like.
It's important to be aware of a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. So these are concepts by Carol Dweck, fellow author, and she talks about this idea that we think, okay, we're born a certain way, like into a certain social class or, whatever it is. And that's just how it is. You need to accept your lot in life. And that's how it's always going to be. Versus a growth mindset is more curious and forward thinking. And okay, if I'm good at this thing, maybe I could become even better at that thing. Or if I'm not so great at it, maybe I could improve it. And especially when it comes to networking and human connection, I like to encourage even questioning, is it true that you're not good at it? Or maybe it's more true that you simply are not practiced in it or don't have experience. Or if you feel like you do have a lot of experience, maybe it hasn't been, the right headspace hasn't really accompanied the actions. Because it's important to be embodied in what we're doing. Because if we go into a space thinking, oh, this is not going to go well, then what do you think is going to happen? But if we're going to a space authentically open, people can feel that and they're more receptive. And not everyone will be receptive. It's, you could enter a space and just want everyone to be your best friend and really like you. And, it could happen, but just being prepared for, I heard this quote that you can expect, and this is very, if this helps people, I'll put it out there, that you can expect about a third of people to like you, a third of people to not like you, a third of people to not really care. Mm-hmm. And essentially what that does is it levels the playing field and it eliminates this expectation of everyone liking you, everyone not liking you. I mean, there are plenty of people that are just focusing on their own stuff and they're going to not have much of an opinion. But ideally, there isn't really that much of an emphasis on, do these people like me? First of all, do you like yourself? Yes. And then are you able to see the best in other people? And I think those two ingredients can open so many doors where it's less focused on getting external validation and other people telling you, oh, you're okay. Like you deserve to be in this room, because there are certain rooms where you're not going to get that reinforcement and you have to know, oh yeah, I belong here. I like to also think, when it comes to confidence, social confidence or career confidence, viewing everyone as your peer. So that means, the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar organization. Yep, that's your peer. That's a human like you. Yeah. And, on all ends of the spectrum. And someone who's not doing so well, that's your peer too. And it's this ability to stay humble, but also see yourself in the highs and the lows. And just kind of being rooted in what qualities make you human.
What I'm hearing in there as well is a lot of, dropping judgment, and because that perception of what you might think others think of you or what you think of them and the judgments that are tied around all of that, they actually weigh really heavy, don't they, in terms of allowing you to show up in any given situation.
Yeah, there's this concept, actually, the looking glass self. It's one of my favorite sociological concepts. I do mention it in the book. And it is based on a study of recidivist in prisons, which is when, let's say, people commit crimes perpetually. And what it showed is that when people are thinking that people are thinking of them in a particular way, there's too much cognitive dissonance to act differently. So they will act in alignment with not even how they think they should act, but how they think other people think they're going to act, for better or worse. So in the case of crime, in certain marginalized communities, there are some people, studies have shown this, that are more likely to actually commit the crimes because they have the belief that is typically backed up by a bunch of statistics that, they're going to be sort of treated in that way or typecast in that role. So what we can learn from that is to take your power back and to maybe entertain, to be really clear on who you are. And of course, be open to learning things about yourself that you didn't already know. We all have blind spots, but there's really this opportunity when we become aware of these concepts that mold society and shape society, that, okay, maybe we're not immune to those things. And if you're not already clear, how do you think other people think of you? Go ahead and write that down. And do you want that to be true? Because if you don't, it's time to start thinking something different.
Helen's discussion with Meg Ruji centers around the restorative power of art and psychology through a neuroscientific lens. It's a powerful starting point for activating a source of healing that many of us may overlook, our own resonance with beauty.
I'm very interested and passionate about psychology and neuroscience and all that, which is part of my work. And through the years, because I was in fine arts and, neuroscience, I got a lot into art therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And so this ability to just express yourself in a creative way through arts, no matter what type. And it's a healing process. And I've experienced that myself because I had a lot of, trauma and self-consciousness and I still have a lot, we're never perfect. But
It's a lifelong journey, isn't it?
Right. It's just who we are and we go through everything. And when I was in fine arts, I was creating all the time because, that's your job when you go to fine arts. And those few years have been probably some of the best of my life because the healing process, and I'm not saying healing as you have to heal and become perfect, is just the process of letting yourself express through these creative tools.
Yeah.
And it just makes you feel so good mentally, spiritually. Everything is just in this process of releasing stress, the pressure that comes from everyday life or society or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's proven scientifically that arts and creativity is very, very healing. It's very good for the health. And so my question when I really got into this, business and helping people, I realized, but if you can work every single day in your business and heal yourself as when you create an offer or you just talk about your business or you helping your clients or you just marketing what you do. And all of this is a healing process at the same time because you're just creating and you're just letting yourself express and just having fun with it. You're going to feel so much better. You're not going to be stressed. You're not going to be with this anxiety that business might cause. And even if you work in a place, a 9 to 5, and the workplace is set up for, this creative expression, letting you be, in your zone of genius, and the environment is friendly with the creative expression, then, we will all feel much better because they're related, being able to express and to create. It's very good. It's a very good process for the human beings. And so, it's
I often think of healing it's almost like peeling off the layers of social conditioning and, whatever life might have told you that, those boxes that you're meant to fit into and things like that. And actually the healing is coming back to that core essence of who you are. And like you say, through creativity and, we find our confidence there, get a lot of clarity about who we are. Just unpeeling those layers that have been given to us by other people or our own thoughts and beliefs over time. And you're absolutely right. It's such a great therapy to kind of peel back and get back to that core version of yourself.
Yeah. And also something that I always want to add is when you do that for yourself and you allow yourself to heal through that creative process, you're also helping a lot of people around you because they can feel the energy, they can feel the process. And when you feel better, people around you feel better.
Jessie Glaze sat down with Helen to discuss what happens when you don't prioritize your own mental and physical health, how easy it can be to become entangled in self-medicative abuse, and ultimately how to rise up against it all and prevail against your own demons.
There were a lot of shifts. A big one was I used to drink a lot to kind of cope with how I was feeling. And I was in denial about that right up until the day that I stopped drinking. And I was like, oh, this is a bigger deal than I thought it was. And that was a huge piece of it, was starting to build a community of people who had chosen not to drink. And I still have a lot of friends that do. And I'm not judging again, right? Like, I'm not shaming anybody for what they choose, but that really helped me learn how I was trying to numb away certain things or trying to avoid certain things, right? Like, it made it very different to build intimacy when there's not a glass of wine first. It made it very different to have an argument, and it made it very different to deal with social anxiety or other areas where I was masking some of this shame, and then I didn't have a mask anymore.
Yeah.
And I started doing a lot more of the somatic work, but it started with yoga and kind of developed from there. And I started doing a lot more shadow work where I was looking at, okay, what are these things that are causing me shame and why? What are the things that I'm so scared I might be? Let's look at that. And let's kind of like have a conversation with the demons instead of trying to like lock them in a closet. And it really has been an ongoing process since there. And there have been a few big shifts, but I feel like that for me was probably the starting point.
Yeah, I can really resonate with that. I think I stopped drinking about 5 years ago. And yeah, it's been a huge part of my journey as well. So yeah, we can really resonate with that. So I believe that the majority of parents, they do the best that they possibly can as parents. So what are your views on how we help to educate people that the way that we may have been brought up might not be the way that we want to bring our own children up? I mean, I can't tell you how many times I get, well, it didn't do me any harm. And then, like you say, there's a whole catalogue of coping mechanisms that are in place in that person's life. So how do we help people to see that maybe their childhood has shaped their adulthood, and some of this, let's call it dysfunction, we could maybe avoid if we brought our own children up in a slightly different way?
Absolutely. And I think one of the underlying things that I see with bringing up children that I think I'm like, oh, we could be doing this better, is making use of our communities. Because raising children is impossible. You can't actually do it by yourself. You can't do it perfectly. And one of the most helpful statistics that I ever learned is that if you meet your child's needs 40% of the time, they're unlikely to have like adverse events. It's like, it's not even, such a low bar.
Cool.
But there's, right? But there's so much shame around, the joke about like the Pinterest mom, and it's got to look like this and it's got to be this. I will say, as far as, oh, it didn't bother me, or, oh, it didn't affect me, or I turned out okay. When I hear that response, what I'm hearing is resistance to a different idea because you didn't.
Yeah.
Where it's, because it's always spat at you. It's never like, oh, I think I turned out okay. It's like, well, I turned out okay.
Yes.
Right? Always in that defensive, like, how dare you? There is no other way. Because if there were another way, that's so unfair.
Yes.
And it's that resistance to sadness about, hey, it turns out that like, they're not just small adults.
Self-kindness is also a big theme in Ryan Siddique's episode. It's an uplifting journey from self-doubt and self-loathing through to self-acceptance and ultimately onwards towards self-love. Ryan's candid honesty and willingness to share from experience is transformative.
I definitely have my days where, it is dark and there are no positive things, and it feels impossible to pick yourself up out of that sometimes. But one of the main points of my book is the main character has to remember to be kind to herself. There's these other voices in her head, the other car students, I call them carlets, saying not so nice things. And she has to find it in herself to remember, her good points. And so it's funny because, that wasn't necessarily what I was thinking when I wrote it. But now looking at it, it was like, I was trying to teach that lesson to kids, but it's also a reminder for myself.
Yeah.
Kindness. We always talk about kindness to others, being kind to others. And I think that is so incredibly important, even when others are not being kind to you.
Yeah.
But we forget about kindness to ourselves.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's, something that every time I think about Phoebe and her story, it's like, oh yeah, that was a reminder for me too.
You know what? I have a really vivid memory as a child with my mum reading me a story, and she's reading the story and she's got tears coming down her cheeks. And I said to her, "Why are you crying?" I didn't think it was a sad story. And she said, "You know what? It's sometimes in books, things hit differently for a child and for an adult."
Yep.
And I think that's exactly what you're describing. It sounds like a self-help book from an adult perspective.
Yes.
And a fun story from a child's perspective. And I think that was the same with this book that my mum was reading to me in that particular experience as well. So how have you changed as a mother, a wife, a daughter, a friend, a sister through all of these experiences?
I've had to really learn to say no, which is really hard because I don't like to say no, but I have to listen to my energy levels, and I have to make sure that I don't push too far, because if I do, then I'm out for several days to try to recover. I have to ask for help. That's a really hard thing to do too.
It's tough.
When you're
especially when
independent woman.
Absolutely. And in your career, no doubt, I'm sure that there was a certain worth attached to getting everything done yourself, because I've also worked in the finance world.
100%.
Yeah. So learning to ask for help and learning to stop, that's a big shift, isn't it?
It's a huge shift. And, like you said, a large part of your worth is attached to that. And we had a system where when we completed a task, it would turn blue. And it was, the saying was, when it's blue, you're through. Like if your whole task list was blue, then you were done for the day. So, I think, just as a parent in general, there's no blue, there's no accomplishing things, right? So then when you're
not the whole list.
No, never. So then when you're not feeling well, on top of that, and I mean, some days what you accomplish is, I got out of bed.
Yeah.
That's really hard. Really hard. And, I think my biggest thing, talking about getting out of the darkness and staying positive, it's a lot of embracing the darkness and finding beauty in, the quiet and, where you can, and then just being thankful as much as you can for those things, and being thankful and grateful for the things that are around you, and the things you have been given. And that is what really helps to pull me out of those dark days.
Thank you for joining me for this review of some of the golden moments from season 3 of Becoming Unapologetically Me. Go back and re-listen to the episodes that you may have missed, and then share the show with 2 other people that you think may really resonate with messages like this. Thank you for taking this journey with Helen Norbury and myself. I love having this show personally as a source of support as I'm becoming unapologetically me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Becoming Unapologetically Me. Make sure you subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts so you never miss an episode.